I would like to welcome everyone, ladies and gentlemen, to the Marines Memorial Club and to realize this fateful day in the history of the United States, the Battle of Iwo Jima. We have the 23rd Marine Regiment and the Color Guard here, and what we'd like to do at the beginning is ask them to post the colors.
March.
Heavenly Father, Almighty God, we lift up to you our sons who have paid the supreme sacrifice. May they rest in peace, and may perpetual light shine upon them. Bless these who returned home wounded, with lost limb, darkened eyes, telltale scars. May we never forget their daily pain. Bless those who are currently serving our country in uniform. Renew their sense of duty, fill them with honor, enrich them with love for our country, keep them out of harm's way, and bring them home safely.
A greeting from Lieutenant General Snowden, who's today on Iwo Jima, on the island. This is the only day of the 365 days a year that people are allowed to traipse through the caves and to visit all the fighting holes, and they have to be off the island by sunset. So I guess with the time change, they're already off the island, but he sent his best wishes and again to salute to his fellow Iwo Jima veterans. So General Snowden, we're thinking about you too. Yeah. You know, one of the regiments that landed on Iwo Jima with the 4th Marine Division was the 23rd Marines. And the 23rd Marines are the saving grace for the Marines Memorial here in San Francisco. They're at San Bruno, and I don't know what we would do without having the Marines here. And there's a great collection of the 23rd Marines sprinkled around in the audience. But I want to thank all of you, and I'm going to introduce your boss in a minute, but to all you members of the 23rd Marines, thank you so much. I asked him to speak today because of the history of the 23rd Marines on Iwo Jima, and he agreed right away. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Colonel Chris Starling.
So I feel immensely privileged to stand in front of a group of my fellow Marines, but 25, basically a platoon of Iwo Jima veterans. That is a great distinction and honor for me today. And General Myatt, thank you for your kind comments. I've been richly blessed over the years to wake up in the morning for the last 25 years and go to work with United States Marines. And that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I take every day and I savor it because I realize how special it is. And General Myatt mentioned my dad. Yes, my dad was the Navy chaplain. And it is every dream of a parent that when you reproduce, that your offspring will somehow do better than you. And I remember telling my dad when I got my Marine Corps commission, Dad, look, I'm 21. I'm already better than you. I'm a Marine. So that's a joke. It's a joke. My dad still counsels me all the time and corrects me on things. And like I said, I've had a very great run in the Marine Corps. I will tell you that Iwo Jima has a very special place in my heart. As a young second lieutenant, I was with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit, commanding a platoon, and we were in the Heliborne Company, and we did a heliborne assault on Iwo Jima. And here I was as a second lieutenant, and I remember the sun was coming up, and I looked out of that little bubble window of a CH-46 and saw Mount Suribachi, and we rolled right into airfield number 2. And I'll tell you, I've been on many battlefields. I've walked Belleau Wood, I've walked Gettysburg, I've been all over Incheon, and many other famous battlefields worldwide. Nothing had the impact on me that Iwo Jima did. And so it's a pleasure for me to talk a little bit about that, to talk about specifically my regiment, and then to kind of tie it into the current day, because not a day goes by at my headquarters where we don't think about and reflect on our Iwo Jima veterans. And I'll prove it to you. If you look out in the other room next door, if you saw all the art and the pictures that was there, all those pictures were taken down out of my passageways today and off my quarterdeck. Some of them are Tinian and Saipan and other pictures, but most of the photos in my headquarters are pictures of Iwo Jima. When you walk into my headquarters building at San Bruno, and any of you are always welcome to come by, you just ring the little buzzer and identify yourself as a Iwo Jima veteran. You can come visit my headquarters anytime. And right above the passageway, it says Iwo Jima. Of course, we have Saipan, we have Tinian, we have Desert Shield, Desert Storm on above the windows and right along the roof line. But in big 2-foot block letters, you'll see Iwo Jima right in the center. Okay, so these pictures that are outside that we brought from our headquarters, and that commemoration, every day we think about Iwo Jima. One of my first experiences, I remember running the Marine Corps Marathon with my brother. I'd never seen the Iwo Jima Memorial in Arlington. It's kind of hidden by the trees. You have to really look for it. And so we're running the Marine Corps Marathon, my brother and I, and at the end of it, I don't care who you are, a marathon is a pretty good event. And you're kind of tired at the end of it. So I'm kind of feeling sorry for myself. I've been running 25 miles. And I came around the corner and we come up this last hill, and there was that Iwo Jima Memorial. And I got a second and a third wind. I felt invigorated just looking at that monument and remembering what it stood for. That was one. And so those three things, running the marathon and seeing that monument, what I see in my headquarters every day, and then being a second lieutenant with the 15th MU and spending the night on Iwo Jima right next to airfield number 2. And then, my Marines wanted to kill me because I made them go on a forced march. We went everywhere. We went to Bloody Gorge, Bloody Nose Ridge. We went up to Suribachi, did a re-enlistment back then. I had them running all over that island. I think we almost had heat casualty, from the amount of hiking we had to do back and forth, even in February. But it was a wonderful, memorable time, and we got to really get a good look. As General Myatt said, they only open the island once in a while, and those are special tours, but we actually got to go in and train briefly. So what I'm going to talk about quickly is, what it was like in February 1945. And for those of you who were there, I'm not going to tell you anything new. You guys know this backward and forward. But for the rest of us that are in the room, maybe just to set the stage a little bit, I'm going to talk about the 23rd Marine Regiment under the command of Colonel Walter Wensinger, whose name and my name are going to be on a piece of paper for the rest of eternity, because that's how it works with a regimental lineage. And then I'll talk about some comparisons to the modern day and the bonds and linkages that we have. So what was the big picture in 1945? Well, we were closing in on mainland Japan, and General MacArthur was taking back the Philippines. He said he would return, and he was on his way back. And up at the joint staff level, the decisions were made, well, how are we going to tackle mainland Japan? And we know that the Japanese were a very viable foe. They were very fanatical. And the determination was made, we were flying B-29 bombers. These were brand new, the Super Fortress, brand new airplane. They were so bold about this thing, they didn't even camouflage it. It was a silver airplane, okay? And we put several hundred of these out in the Marianas Islands. They could carry 4 tons of bombs. The old B-24s could only carry 2 tons. They could fly 3,400 miles. The B-24s could only fly about 2,400 miles. And so these were the new, biggest, baddest airplanes around. They cost about $500 million a pop. Now in today's dollars, that's about $6.5 million. That's a pretty good bargain. considering the Joint Strike Fighter costs about $260 million. You know, with sequestration, we might go back to B-29s. You know. But as the B-29s were staged in the Marianas, the Japanese were launching airstrikes against those bases and destroying some of them on the ground. The other thing is, as they would do raids over mainland Japan, they would come back. Some of them were crippled. They'd have to ditch into the sea. And so if you look at Iwo Jima compared to the Marianas, it's kind of part way. It's 650 miles south of Japan. And so this became a strategic piece because the Japanese were flying airplanes from there. We needed more airfields in between where we were flying from in mainland Japan. So the decision was made at the highest echelons to, that Iwo Jima was going to be it, and it was going to be you know, the 4th and the 5th Marine Division and also the 3rd Marine Division in on that. And so you have this operation that's being planned that has a logistical tail all the way back to Hawaii. So Tokyo's 650 miles away. You've got an island that's 5 miles by 2.5 miles. It's shaped like a pork chop. We're going to land 3 divisions on that island, about 70,000 total personnel, and not just Marines. We also had, of course, our Navy. We always have our corpsmen, our hospitals. We also had CB battalions, entire CB battalions coming ashore. And we also had some Army air defense. 485 ships, over 500 landing craft, and then you had an enemy task force of 22,000. Now, if you can picture 5 miles by 2 miles and cramming 22,000 people in there that, you know, have to go about their daily lives, that's pretty tight quarters. And then they reinforced that for over a year. They worked on reinforcing that with bunkers, concrete, rebar, you name it. General Kuribayashi, who led that task force, Lieutenant General, who, by the way, had spent some time in Washington as an attaché, also Ottawa, Canada, as a military attaché, understood the United States, spoke very good English. He understood that he was out there and probably wasn't going to make it back from this mission. And his commander's intent was, we're going to make it as tough as possible for a U.S. force to come on this island and even take 1 yard of ground. And his guidance was, for every one of us on the island, we're going to take down 10 Americans. That was basically his commander's intent. And they had looked at Saipan and Tinian. They looked at our landings before. What also happened in June 1944 was the Normandy landing. So they had studied the Normandy landing and figured out, you know, if you attack and give away your gun positions while people are coming ashore, they can zero that naval gunfire on you and their fire support. What we'll do is we'll let them come up all the way up close and get right in, you know, eyeball range, and then we'll open fire. And that way it'll negate some of their fire support, because when you try to have battleships, it's not a precision weapon. You fire those battleships and you drop bombs from the air. If you're tight up against the enemy, that becomes very difficult, and you run the risk of killing your own people. And so Kuribayashi, he understood this, and he understood American tactics, and so he had a mission, and he went about it with great effort and veracity. To me, this battle is unmatched. Okinawa was a bigger amphibious force, and Normandy was also a bigger amphibious landing. But the difference there is you had pretty large land masses. You weren't landing on a 2 mile by 5 mile island. So when you look at the scope and scale of this, it was incredible. For 70 days, we ran bomber aircraft over this island and bombed from the air. And then for 3 days, we had 8 battleships and a host of other naval gunfire platforms pounding this island into oblivion for nothing but for 3 days. Now, the Marine commander, Howland Mad Smith, wanted a 4th day. And Admiral Spruance peeled off part of his task force 58, and had another mission to do. And the Marines kind of got shortchanged a little bit by that decision. But 3 days of constant 24-hour, 7 days a week pounding on that island. That's impressive. And you look at it, we also had 12 aircraft carriers were part of that, 43 transports, 63 LSTs, landing ship tank. Today in the U.S. Navy, we have 31 amphibious platforms. We're down to 31 amphibious platforms. It's one of the things that our senior leadership is battling with the Navy. We tell the Navy, hey, 33 is the absolute minimum we can do. 31 is what we have. They're building a couple more, but that's a big concern for us in terms of our amphibious capability. But when I look at Iwo Jima, unbelievable how many, and then the logistics behind it. The 4th Marine Division packed 100 million cigarettes in the cargo hold. When you plan an amphibious invasion, you got to think about stuff like pencils, toilet paper. 4.1 million barrels of oil were used by the U.S. Navy to resupply ships, tanks, fuel for vehicles. You're thinking about every little detail, can openers, rations, water. All these things had to be packed in Hawaii and shipped out and loaded in such a manner that you can offload it with the ammunition and the water first, what Marines really need in combat, and the rest of the stuff comes afterwards. Medical supplies for all the casualties we expected. They had the forethought to paint and build white crosses, for thousands of them, for the American cemeteries that we knew that we were going to put on Iwo Jima. This is amphibious planning, and it's it's an amazing feat in the amount of time they had to plan it, pack it, and move it out. It's an unbelievable feat. This map shows the naval gunfire areas as they parceled up Iwo Jima for the prep fires. And so you can see that battleships had little pieces of land, and that's what they were responsible for. And then you had naval gunfire spotters who would try and find those pillboxes, those specific targets, and reduce them. And despite all this, when our Marines got onto Iwo Jima, it was as if there hadn't been any prep fires. The reinforced concrete, the guns were placed so well in such great detail with superior construction quality that our pre-invasion bombardment had very little effect. The Japanese were fully ready to take the Marine assault. Now, a couple days ago, I was up in Jackson, California. I got a phone call from Colonel Fraser West. Some of you know him. Fraser West turned 95 on the 1st of March. He commanded a company on Guam. He was wounded there pretty seriously, had to come back, Silver Star recipient. But like many of you in this room, when you call me, I have a problem saying no. So Fraser West called me and said, we need you to talk on the 19th of February. Well, I know that's an important date. That was the date we went into Iwo. And he said, or he wanted me to talk on the 23rd, the day the flag went up. And the topic was Harry the Horse Liversedge, who was the commander of 28th Marine Regiment. So I went up there and I talked about Harry Liversedge, and I used this picture as, he had a pretty short objective there. They landed on the far left flank of Iwo Jima, hung a left turn, and took Mount Suribachi. And in a couple days, put that great flag up, that great flag raising that Joe Rosenthal caught in a perfect timing of shooting that shot with AP News, and that picture went around the world. But I enjoyed talking about Harry the Horse Liversedge because I learned about him. He was a Olympic athlete, went to 2 Olympic Games, threw the shot put and got 3rd bronze medal in the Antwerp Olympics. He was an amazing football player here at Cal Berkeley and a rugby player. And he spent a lot of time here in the Bay Area, so he's quite a legend here. But I remember telling Colonel West, I said, look, I got an event on the night of the 23rd. I really can't make it. He said, well, what time's your event start, Colonel? I said, well, it starts about 1800. He goes, mine's at 10. You can make it here and back. I said, yes, sir, I'll be there. So, that's one of the logistics planners there for you that can pull this stuff off. So I saw this, and I love this picture of him with his XO, because I like to stand around with my XO too and make plans with maps. What I noticed is that, the canteen cup has not changed since 1945. I got the same one. When I go to the field, I shave and I drink coffee out of the same one. So although there's been great technology in coffee making and coffee consumption in Starbucks, I shave and drink out of the same cup as an infantryman, and I take some pride in that, just like the XO of 28th Marines here. That was 28th Marines, and I'm going to talk a little bit now about 23rd Marines and what the 23rd Marine Regiment did going into Iwo Jima. This is a picture of 123 on Yellow Beach. That was our beach, and you can see all the way to Suribachi. That's where 28th and 27th Marines would have been coming ashore there. So the CO again was Colonel Wensinger. He retired as a lieutenant general many years later, had a very interesting career prior to and after Iwo Jima. But his task on this day was to go into the middle of this line. And it's always hard when you're in the middle because you've got a unit on your left flank and your right flank, And you've got to coordinate the fires. You know, when we set up boundaries, one of the hardest things you got to do is make sure your Marines are shooting within their boundaries, and you got to trust the adjacent guys are going to do theirs. And so I didn't envy this tasking. When Colonel Wensinger got this task, he goes, gosh, you know, why couldn't I be one of the flank units, you know, like Harry the Horse over there? He's got it pretty easy. You know, his fires are all going to be moving in one direction, and it's less coordination. But this was a tough mission. 2 airfields, and then, you know, they had it planned out to take in the 2nd airfield, and then they were going to do fragmentary orders after that. As the attack went on, you know, of course, it landed on the 19th, and if you look at this map, look at the top right, it shows your legend, and, you know, we're talking about yards. You know, this is not miles, or we're used to looking at kilometers or whatever. We're talking about yards and days. And so the Marines in the 23rd Marine Regiment, and also 24th and 25th that were part of the 4th Division with us, they fought for hundreds of yards in a day. And it was brutal, bunker-to-bunker fighting, and the same kind of stuff. Bring the flamethrower up, bring the satchel charges up, suppress the bunker, get in close, seal off those caves. And it was brutal hand-to-hand fighting in a lot of cases. Mount Suribachi gets a lot of attention because that's the flag raising, but when you come down and you want to look at where the real fighting took place, it really took place in the center of the island. And 28th Marines also, to their credit, they turned around after they got done with Suribachi. They were in the same kind of fighting too on the northern end. But there are places like the Turkey Knob, and this whole area here was known as the meat grinder to the Marines. And so they had to fight, again, bunker to bunker here for yards at a time. This is one of my favorite pictures. It's the command post of the 23rd Marine Regiment, several days into Iwo Jima. Now, when I get mad at my staff, I just look at this picture and go, well, you know, I guess it could be worse. You know, there's junk all over the place. Things are messy, you know, and this has a calming effect for me, that somebody made order out of all this and continued on. So it is one of my favorite photos. This sits on right behind my desk. In my office, and I look at it all the time. Like I told you, I think about Iwo Jima every day. So one of the, I read several books in preparation for this, and I found that, you know, one of the most interesting pieces that I didn't know as much about as I do now was a night attack that occurred on the 8th and 9th of March. And guys like Dale Cook were there in Fox Company 223, taking the brunt of this. But you had a guy named Captain Inoue, a Navy captain. He brought together remnants of 2 battalions that were, you know, pretty much devastated. Captain Inoue decides we need to do something here, and General Kuribayashi gave his order. He said, look, there will be no banzai attacks. Banzai attacks are a waste of manpower and a waste of resources. We're going to just bleed everybody slow and fall back generally, again, taking 10 of them for every one of us. Well, Captain Inoue decided to change the tactics one night, and he gathered up as many guys as he could. And what's interesting here is they actually had a big Japanese flag, and the plan was to attack the Americans and then, you know, plow through their lines, you know, 3.5 miles back up Suribachi and put the Japanese flag back up there. And I thought that's a pretty bold plan right there when you got to go through 3 Marine divisions to do it. So it was a last gasp attack, but, you know, it was at night. You can imagine how confused everything was. You know, some of the Japanese would yell corpsman. They knew how to say that to try and get our corpsmen to pop up and run toward them. All kinds of little tricky, sneaky tactics that they used. But they attacked ferociously that night, and all night the Marines fought. And the next morning, there were 794 enemy killed in front of the Marine positions. At one point, they came within about 15 yards of the 223 command post. So they were hurling hand grenades at a battalion command post. I mean, that's how far they got. And again, we lost 90 Marines that day, had about another 260 plus injured. But that is one night of just the savagery of the fighting on Iwo Jima. And, you know, Cushman's Pocket, similar situation. And that wasn't in my brief originally, but I could go on. I could sit here and talk for 3 hours about the different places at Bloody Nose Ridge and Bloody Gorge and the other battles that went on, micro battles within this big battle. So what's the significance here? 36 days. You had basically a piece of land a third of the size of Manhattan. To me, it's not measurable to any other battle that has ever taken place since. And 1/3 of all the Marine casualties in World War II occurred on Iwo Jima. With 23rd Marine Regiment, Colonel Wensinger landed about 3,400 Marines. 66% of them became casualties. And with some units, it was higher. Some units, when units got a break and they went into the reserve, they got off the front line, and that meant that instead of mortars and artillery and direct fire rifles and machine guns shooting at them, they could go back a couple hundred yards and have only mortars and artillery shooting at them. You had wounded Marines on the beach that were still being fired at because General Kuribayashi had planned this out. It was, the entire island was a kill zone. Everything had been spotted with mortars and artillery. And so systemically, we had to go through and take out those positions. The casualties, and Dale mentioned it earlier in his invocation, were stunning. Close to 6,000 Marines, and then just over 17,000 wounded. Our Navy brothers, 881, and then almost 2,000 wounded. A lot of them were corpsmen. A lot of them were the Seabees that were doing the construction work in support of the Marines. And then we also had the Army. Interestingly enough, on the 26th of February, the battle was pretty much done for the Marines. We turned it over to the Army. The Army killed another 1,000 Japanese in the following weeks, and they captured another 216. And a lot of them that they captured were Korean laborers that were forced to work there, that were just trying to hide it out. But the Japanese had entire hospitals underground that we didn't even know about. Even when the Marines were pulling off the island, you still had Japanese hospitals functioning under the ground. So the Japanese toll was obviously much higher. Over 20,000 of their soldiers died on that island. And then, barely over 1,000 ended up being captured, and they were probably shell-shocked or come across. Very few ever willingly surrendered, as we all know. So with that, as we look at Iwo Jima and we reflect on this, what does that mean to our future? Well, one of the things is we know that the nature of warfare has changed. We're not fighting nation states the way we used to, although we could. And the fact that the Koreans just kind of canceled the armistice from 1953, that's a concern, because that's a nation-on-nation potential type of fight that nobody hopes happens. There's also Iran and other things, so that's out there. But mainly we fight among the people instead of against another people. So the days of going into somebody's capital and taking it down and planting the flag and saying we're done, those are long gone. And so we're fighting a much more complex fight. So amphibious operations are a lot different now. As we load up, we don't really know where we're going or what we're going to fight. So what do we bring and how do we pack it? Those are the kinds of things that we sort out on a regular basis. You can see on the far right there, we have this OMTFS, Operational Maneuver from the Sea. We also look at ship-to-objective maneuver. So we don't plan as much like you all did to land, get a forced beachhead line, establish a lot of logistics ashore, and then fight inland. We go right from the ship to the objective. And we use the speed and the surprise of our entry platforms. We also use the fire support that is very precision-guided now. So it's a bit different. But in the back of our minds, trust us, we still look at that offloading on Iwo Jima, and we know that there's a potential that we would have to do it. And I'm here to tell you the Marine Corps is in pretty good hands, and the young people you have sitting around here, if they get pushed into that kind of situation where they would have to go over those kind of fire-swept beaches and gorges and hills, they will do it. Of that, I have no doubt. The uniqueness of amphibious warfare, I touched on that. We had the Navy and the Army Air Corps on Iwo Jima. Now we do everything with foreign countries. Everything I've done in 3 years as a regimental commander has involved South American partners, Middle Eastern partners, Pacific. 72 hours ago, I was in the Republic of Georgia, where I've got 82 Marines training 2 Georgian battalions right along the border of Azerbaijan. They're training up there. They're going to train for about 6 months, and those battalions are going to go to Afghanistan and fight alongside Marines in Helmand Province. Everything we do now is with a combined nature, combined meaning other countries. Joint is with our services, combined is with foreign nations. So that's something. Field medicine is incredible now, and recently, I think right here in this club, Admiral Nathan, the Surgeon General of the Navy, gave a speech about naval medicine and the technology now that's out there. And whereas Marines at Iwo Jima, there was a lot of cases of Marines that were wounded that would get moved from spot to spot, but their lives couldn't be saved. That has changed. Just the first aid kit that we carry is so advanced with quick clot technology. If you make it to a trauma center, within that golden hour, your chances of surviving are in the high 90s percentage-wise. That wasn't the case on Iwo Jima. We did not have that kind of technology and that kind of equipment then, and we have it now. And the last thing I added on here was prior to Iwo Jima, you had the Raider regiments, and old Harry Liversedge, he was a commander of the 3rd Marine Raider Battalion and then commanded the Raider Regiment. We now have this Marine Special Operations Command. We have 3 battalions, 1 regiment of special operations that now fit in under the U.S. Special Operations Command. These are Marines that, they're in the spirit of the old Raider battalions. Some of them right now have long beards. They're riding horseback in Afghanistan. They're immersed in the Philippines. They speak different languages. They immerse in other cultures, and they are an amazing force multiplier. Again, that springs from something that was started with the generation of our Iwo Jima vets, the Raider battalions. And when you go to their headquarters in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, you'll see all those Raider pictures up on the wall. So we are thinking about that World War II generation and really that defined our Marine Corps every single day, wherever you go. One of the last things I want to look at is combat load. You guys did it right, 51 pounds per infantryman. We're not doing it so right now. 97 pounds of gear on an infantryman. And if you're a mortarman, 106 pounds back in the day, 137 pounds now if you're hiking a mortar. That's manly business right there. But also a BAR man was somewhere in between 51 and 106. I know Dale was hiking a BAR around. But these are some of the things that, as we compare where technology has taken us and how we fight, you were able to move a little bit faster carrying only 51 pounds of gear than I can move carrying 97. I'll assure you that. So that's something that we're looking at. That's probably going to change. We're probably going to get a little bit lighter. We're going to go on Weight Watchers. So the last thing I want to share with you is about 2.5 years ago, I sent my last battalion to Afghanistan. It was 1st Battalion, 23rd Marines. And my good friend Richard Burris, who lives down in Palo Alto, I took him down there to visit my battalion. It was about 1,000 Marines getting ready to ship out. So we went down there, and there's a picture on the right of Dick Burris standing with Lieutenant McVeigh. Lieutenant McVeigh commanded the 2nd Platoon of Bravo Company 123. Dick Burris commanded that same platoon on Iwo Jima. So I put them both together there, and they got to talking with each other, and it was a wonderful time. If you look at the picture to the left, that's Major Korth. He's the company commander. He is, yes, that is not a Photoshop image. He is 6'7". And Dick Burris walked right up with him and said, "Guys like you didn't last long on Iwo." I'm like, "Dick, you're supposed to pump him up and get him ready to go here." But it was funny. He got in front of the whole group and he said, "Marines, I got some good news for you, and I got some bad news. The good news is that these guys on your left and right are going to be your buddies for the rest of your life. The guys you go into combat with and you share those hardships and you come back together, those bonds last your entire life." He said, "The bad news, this is what you're going to look like 70 years from now." I'll leave you with just 2 little pictures here. One is Kilo Company 323, 1945, fixed bayonets. The other is Company A 123 in Afghanistan. Will tell you that the fighting spirit and the soul of the Marines is pretty much the same. You can change the circumstances, you can change the arena, but we train Marines to be tough, to have the willpower to overcome and to succeed in any endeavor. And that's what we're about. It is a great pleasure to be here among you, and I look forward to talking to each of you in some more detail and savoring each of these lessons that you have shared with us over the years. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll agree with me that the 23rd Marine Regiment's in good hands. But I want to tell you a little story first and read something to you about Joe Rosenthal. The photo that's become the image that people see the Marine Corps has been identified with is that photo that Joe Rosenthal took on the 23rd of February, 1945. You know, it's amazing, even back in those days when that was the analog days, when we didn't have digital pictures to send around, within days that picture went around the free world. And it was a shot in the arm for many of the Americans because it was a positive sign that something good was happening in the Pacific. Little did we know that that battle on Iwo Jima would last another 6 weeks with the horrific casualties that we saw that were portrayed here by Colonel Starling. But Joe Rosenthal was a San Franciscan. He actually worked for the San Francisco Chronicle, and when the war broke out, he tried to go in the military, but his vision was so bad they wouldn't accept him, so he became a combat photographer. He landed with the Marines on Saipan, and he saw a lot of combat there, so he knew what he was getting into when he landed on Iwo Jima. And when he got on Iwo Jima, he did happen to be in that spot where they took the second flag they raised, and he actually said he took the photo as he was falling back because it happened so quickly. I was fortunate enough to meet him in 2002, in May 6 in 2002, because there was a combat correspondence chapter here in San Francisco named the Joe Rosenthal Combat Correspondence. And in the summer before, he had moved to this home in Petaluma, and they used to meet here, and Dale was in that chapter, and they invited me to join them for this luncheon up in Petaluma, and Joe Rosenthal there, and they were going to honor Joe that day. And they did, and it was a nice luncheon, and they asked Joe to give a talk. And Joe stood up, no notes or anything. He gave this marvelous talk. And I took copious notes and printed those notes and put it in a program. And I have some copies of his talk that if any of you want to get a copy, I'll give you a copy. But I'm going to read a couple things of what he said. And there was a tribute to him on the 7th floor. Here, there's a photo in the plaque, and it really what Joe Rosenthal, his biggest message was, yes, I took the photo, but it was the Marines that took Iwo Jima. And I think he felt very strongly, but in his talk, and this is just an excerpt from it, he said, I was a civilian in the midst of a military operation. I have the obligation to report on the extraordinary contributions of a great number of men in their teens and early 20s about how much they contributed to our country. The fighting they did, you all must read about them. It was in the 1940s, almost 6 decades ago, an extraordinary time in the world when the United States was in great danger. There was danger that the United States might not survive. Our nation mobilized its young men to answer the call to serve. At the risk of using poor English, I will say that these young men gave their most utmost. The outcome was in doubt for some time. And for 3.5 years of great losses of youth of our country, these men made history. They created history for future organizations of military to emulate. I was happy to be able to witness what was being done by people who knew how to do it. Those Marines saved the day and saved our country for us up to and including today. The reading of their exploits will create more patriots who will be willing to do the same if our nation ever calls. And I thought that was a great tribute to the Iwo Jima veterans, and he felt so close to you all, and I'm going to get my glass and we're going to have a toast. But you set the standards that we have followed since. To you, Iwo Jima veterans, bless you. Hear, hear.
Leo.